June 18th, 1969. Quang Tri Province, just before dawn. I was a first lieutenant then, newly assigned as a platoon leader in Charlie Company. 32 men followed me into the jungle that morning. Most were young, quiet, still carrying the stiff confidence of training bases and instructors who promised that discipline and firepower could solve anything. We stepped off at 05:30. The air was already heavy, wet enough to cling to the skin. Boots sank into the earth with every step. Our formation was textbook: point man forward, fire team spread, rifles low but ready. M16A1s, M1 helmets, ERDL jungle fatigues darkened by sweat within minutes. The jungle looked empty, no movement, no gunfire, no sign of the enemy. That should have frightened us more than it did. Silence felt like relief. We mistook it for safety. I remember watching the ground more than the trees, noticing how the leaves formed natural paths, how roots broke the surface in places boots naturally avoided. Something about the terrain felt deliberate, shaped. I dismissed the thought. The manuals warned us about ambushes, not about dirt and leaves. The sound came without warning. Not a shot. Not an explosion. A dry crack, sharp and sudden. The point man dropped straight down. 1 second, he was walking. The next, he was gone, swallowed by the earth. His scream tore through the jungle before his rifle hit the ground. Everything unraveled instantly. Men shouted. Someone yelled, "Trap!" Rifles swung wildly, searching for an enemy that wasn't there. Training said, "Scan the tree line, find the shooter." Instinct said, "Freeze." We pulled him out of the pit with shaking hands. Blood soaked through his trousers, dark and fast. Sharpened bamboo spikes had punched through muscle and flesh, angled upward with careful intent. There was no explosion, no blast wave, just gravity, sharpened wood, and our own momentum. It was clear almost immediately. The trap wasn't meant to kill him. It was meant to hurt him badly enough that we had to stop. That was when fear truly set in. Every man's eyes dropped to the ground, rifles lowered without orders. The jungle canopy meant nothing now. The real danger was beneath our boots. We advanced inches at a time, prodding the earth with bayonets, breaking formation without realizing it. The spacing we drilled for months collapsed, men bunched together, afraid to move alone. That made us vulnerable. I shouted orders. Security left, security right. But voices sounded distant even to my own ears. The traps were everywhere once we knew how to see them. Slight depressions in the soil, leaves arranged too neatly, vines stretched at ankle height, tied to bent saplings holding tension, pungy stakes, spike pits, spring-loaded bamboo traps that snapped upward with terrifying speed. Primitive materials, advanced thinking. Whoever built them understood how Americans walked, where we stepped, how we relaxed when we thought no one was watching. We called for a medevac. The weight stretched time into something elastic. Every second felt loud. Every sound in the jungle, a bird, a shifting branch, made fingers tighten on triggers. Yet no shots came. That absence told me everything. If the enemy wanted to fire, this was the moment. We were clustered, distracted, bleeding, but they stayed hidden. They let the jungle do the work for them. This wasn't about body counts or territory. It was about control. The trap forced us to stop. The injury forced us to wait. The waiting forced fear to grow. By the time the helicopter arrived, morale had already taken its first deep wound. The wounded soldier was lifted out, pale and silent now, staring at nothing. When the sound of the rotors faded, the jungle felt closer, heavier, as if it leaned inward. We moved again, slower than before. No one spoke. Every step became a question, every patch of earth a threat. The men no longer looked at me for confidence. They looked down, searching for the next hidden spike. That day, we advanced less than half a kilometer. We never saw the enemy. We never fired a shot. We lost one man to sharpened bamboo and patience. By nightfall, every soldier in my platoon understood something no training manual had ever taught us. In Vietnam, even the ground was hostile, and the jungle had learned how to wait. We made camp before sunset, not because the mission required it, but because no one trusted the ground enough to keep moving in the dark. The perimeter was tighter than doctrine recommended. No one argued. Men scraped away leaves with bare hands, exposing raw earth just to see what they were standing on. Every root was tested. Every patch of soil was stabbed before a boot touched it. Night fell fast. The jungle changed when the light disappeared. Sounds multiplied. Cicadas, distant birds, the soft movement of branches, but none of it meant anything specific. That was the worst part. You couldn't tell what mattered and what didn't. Sleep never really came. Men dozed sitting up, rifles across their knees, helmets tipped forward. Every shift of weight caused someone to flinch. A snapped twig outside the wire triggered whispered curses and raised weapons. No one laughed anymore. At first light, we moved again, slower than yesterday. Slower than any patrol I'd ever led. The traps grew smarter, not more complex, just better placed. A bamboo whip trap snapped at knee height, tearing into a man's calf when he brushed a vine. Another pit appeared where a fallen log forced us to detour. Each injury forced us to halt, tighten up, lose momentum. Momentum was life out here. Without it, we became predictable. I realized then that the traps weren't random defenses. They were shaping our behavior, hurting us, teaching us where not to step, when to slow down, when to hesitate. Fear became routine. Men stopped trusting their instincts. Every step required permission from the ground. Progress turned into negotiation. By midday, the heat crushed what was left of our confidence. Sweat blurred vision. Hands shook from dehydration and tension. We were burning calories faster than we could replace them, not from fighting, but from fear. Then we found the body, not ours. An old grave marker, barely visible, bamboo woven into a crude cross. No name, no date, just a reminder that someone had died here before, and the jungle hadn't given them back. That was when it hit me. This ground had been prepared long before we arrived. Weeks, months, maybe years. We weren't walking into a battlefield. We were walking into a system. By the third day, men started asking questions they shouldn't have been asking yet. How many more of these, sir? Why don't they just shoot us? How do you fight something you can't see? I didn't have answers that would help because the truth was simple and terrifying. The bamboo traps weren't there to stop us. They were there to make sure we never felt safe again. And they were working. By the fourth day, the jungle no longer felt like terrain. It felt like intent. Every movement carried weight. Men advanced with shoulders hunched, eyes fixed downward, bayonets probing ahead like blind hands. The habit spread without orders. No one wanted to be the next scream. We adapted, but adaptation came at a cost. Our pace dropped to a crawl. A route that should have taken hours stretched into days. Radios crackled with updates that meant nothing. Grids cleared, no enemy contact, words that no longer reflected reality on the ground. The traps grew crueler, not deadlier, just smarter. Bamboo spikes angled inward instead of up, designed to tear when a leg was pulled free. Trip lines tied to saplings that snapped forward with enough force to break bone. Shallow pits that didn't injure immediately but twisted ankles, turning soldiers into burdens the rest of the platoon had to carry. Every injury slowed us. Every slowdown increased the chance of another. I started to see the pattern clearly now. The enemy didn't need to fire. They were bleeding us in time, energy, and confidence. For every man injured, 5 more were mentally removed from the fight. Watching, hesitating, doubting. Leadership felt heavier than my rucksack. Men watched my feet more than my face. If I stepped somewhere, they followed. If I hesitated, the entire line froze. I realized I was no longer just giving orders. I was setting examples with every step I took. That terrified me more than the traps. One wrong move from me wouldn't just hurt my body, it would break what little trust remained. By afternoon, tempers flared. Short words, sharp looks. Fear needed somewhere to go, and it turned inward. One soldier accused another of missing a trip line on purpose. Another refused to move until someone else tested the ground first. Discipline held, but barely. That night, the jungle closed in tighter than before. Fires were forbidden. Light was forbidden. Even whispering felt dangerous. Men lay awake listening to the earth, as if it might move on its own. I heard someone crying quietly near the perimeter. No one acknowledged it. Morning came with fog thick enough to swallow distance. Visibility dropped to a few meters. The ground disappeared under white haze, turning every step into a gamble. That was when I understood the final layer of the trap. The bamboo wasn't just placed in the jungle. The jungle itself had been turned into a weapon. Weather, time, terrain, fear, all synchronized against us. We were armed with rifles, radios, and artillery waiting miles away. But none of that mattered if we couldn't move without tearing ourselves apart. For the first time since arriving in Vietnam, I thought something I never expected to think. We could lose this without ever fighting a battle, and the bamboo would never fire a single shot. On the fifth morning, we stopped pretending we were in control. Orders still went out, but they felt ceremonial, like habits we clung to, so we wouldn't admit how small the situation had made us. The men followed them, but not with confidence. They followed because stopping felt worse. We were exhausted in ways sleep couldn't fix. Every nerve was tuned to the ground. Every footstep sent a jolt of anticipation through the body. Is this the one? Muscles stayed tense for hours at a time. Hands cramped around rifle grips. Eyes burned from staring at leaves, shadows, and dirt. Fear had become constant. That was its real power. We found another trap that morning before it was triggered. A pit disguised so well, it took 10 minutes of careful probing to expose. When we finally uncovered it, no one felt relief. The reaction was the opposite. If we missed that one yesterday, how many others had we already walked past? Confidence collapsed quietly. Men began second-guessing everything. They asked for confirmation before stepping. They waited for approval that never felt sufficient. Progress slowed further, not because the jungle forced it, but because fear did. I called for artillery fire on suspected enemy positions later that day. The rounds came in heavy, shaking the ground, tearing trees apart. It looked powerful. It sounded decisive. But when the smoke cleared, the jungle still waited. The bamboo traps were untouched. We could destroy hillsides, but we couldn't destroy patience. By afternoon, command ordered us to pull back and regroup. Officially, it was a tactical adjustment. Unofficially, it was an admission that we were losing something harder to replace than men: momentum. As we withdrew, every step felt like surrender. Not to the enemy, but to the ground itself. We moved the same way we had advanced. Slow, probing, afraid. No pursuit followed. They didn't need to chase us. That was the final insult. Back at the rear position, medics treated wounds that looked small on paper: puncture injuries, torn muscle, broken bones. But the real damage wasn't written down. Men avoided eye contact. Conversations were short. Laughter didn't return. The jungle had taught us something brutal. You didn't need firepower to defeat soldiers. You just had to make them doubt every step forward. Long after that operation ended, after redeployments and new missions, I still felt it. Even on safe ground, even years later. A hesitation before stepping, a glance downward, a memory of sharpened bamboo waiting patiently under leaves. We had come to Vietnam prepared to fight men. Instead, we learned how terrifying it was to fight the ground itself. Even after we left that sector, the bamboo followed us, not physically, but mentally. On later patrols in entirely different provinces, I watched the same behaviors emerge: men prodding the earth longer than necessary, hesitating on trails that looked harmless, jumping at sounds that had nothing to do with combat. The jungle had trained us, not in courage, but in caution so deep it bordered on paralysis. Replacements arrived to fill the gaps left by wounds and rotations: fresh faces, clean gear, eyes that hadn't yet learned to fear the ground. Veterans tried to warn them, but words failed. You couldn't explain bamboo traps properly. You had to feel them to understand. And once you did, you never forgot. I saw strong soldiers freeze when ordered forward, not out of disobedience, but out of instinct. Their bodies refused before their minds could argue. The ground had taught them a lesson faster and more permanently than any drill instructor ever could. Command called it low-intensity harassment. That phrase never sat right with me. There was nothing low intensity about watching a man scream as sharpened wood tore into his leg. Nothing minor about the way fear spread silently through a platoon, changing how men walked, talked, and slept. The enemy didn't need to win firefights. They needed to be remembered. Years later, back home, I would catch myself stopping mid-step on a sidewalk, scanning for threats that weren't there. Dry leaves still made my heart jump. Sharp cracks, wood snapping, branches breaking, pulled me instantly back into that jungle. No medals were awarded for surviving bamboo traps. No after-action reports captured what really happened. But every man who walked those trails carried the same understanding with him. In Vietnam, the most effective weapon we faced wasn't a rifle or a bomb. It was fear, carefully planted, patiently waiting beneath our feet.